Welcome to the Wild Type Podcast. I'm Neptune the Chameleon.
I'm Lyssa Lizards.
And we're your reptile girlies. You know what I realize whenever we do the intro and I say I'm Neptune the Chameleon, I'm not actually Neptune the Chameleon.
This is
Neptune
true.
the Chameleon's mom.
You're incognito.
So should I say, and I'm Neptune's mom?
Honestly, it'd make more logical sense, but...
Yeah. Someone called me the other day. They're like, hey, Mrs. Neptune, I have a question.
Oh, wait, that's so cute. I actually love that, Miss Neptune.
Mrs. Neptune. But I do get a lot of Neptune's mom, or just, hey, Neptune.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's fine with me. But
whatever you want to go by, man.
yeah. I mean, you're not Lyssa's Lizards.
No.
You're Lyssa
Yeah.
of Lyssa's Lizards. So
that's true. Doesn't quite make sense.
yeah,
You
we
know.
just roll with it. Anyways, welcome back to the podcast. We're happy you're here, whether you're listening, watching, whatever. Glad you're here. Today we're talking about chubby reptiles.
When the geckos or lizards or snakes or whatever get fat.
When the fat tail is a little
Too chunky.
too fat.
Yeah.
This feels like maybe kind of a weird topic for people, but like
Yeah.
reptile obesity is a real thing.
Yeah, and honestly, like nobody really talks about it. I mean, some people do, but it's one of those weird nuances that not everybody knows about.
Yeah, or how to like prevent it from happening, because a lot of it
Yeah.
feels reactive. Like, oh, your reptile's chubby.
Now we have to
gotta like
backtrack.
address this. Yeah, versus learning the early
Yeah.
signs of it and things you can do to kind of like stop it from happening in the first place.
And honestly, the first step is awareness. You just have to know that it's a problem.
I feel like this is like an addiction. Like
The first step. Yeah. I mean,
You gotta
but it
admit
is
there's a problem.
But it is kind of, because a lot of people will get an animal and not realize that you can go too far with the food. You can go too far, so it's...
So maybe we should start there of just like signs of an overweight reptile. I mean, with chameleons, I feel like it's pretty obvious because we see it in their cheeks and in their casque.
See, but
they
that's-
get puffy.
But that's not obvious to everybody.
Oh, sorry.
That's not obvious to everybody.
Obvious as someone who sees hundreds of chameleons a week that this is.
But that's the whole point.
No.
Like,
You're right. I gotta take a step back, because what we want are lean reptiles.
Yes.
We don't want skinny and we don't want chubby. We want lean reptiles to try and increase their life expectancy. Because if they're carrying extra weight, just like dogs, like that's just going to be more stress on their body.
I was actually going to say that it's very, very similar to dogs and cats, because oftentimes people are so unfortunately used to seeing overweight dogs or cats, or even overweight geckos, overweight snakes, like whatever. It can be like a very, very common thing for that to happen. And it's not something that everybody's aware of. Like my vet straight up told my puppy, who's now...
Speaking of dogs, if you guys can see Campbell in the shot.
Come here, buddy.
Usually her husband is on dog duty,
Yeah.
but he's out today. So we have Campbell in the studio with us.
If you see a little tail, I'm trying to get him to stay in his bed, but he might interrupt. So when we got him, he is a very like lean dog by nature. His hips are very small. So our vet told us, they were like, everybody's going to tell you that he's skinny. He is not skinny.
Yeah.
This is the right look for his body. And so it's important to know for your reptiles,
Exactly.
what does a healthy, lean reptile look like?
Yes.
Because your brain can be skewed
That's totally
on what
true.
yeah.
So I tell this to new keepers all the time. For chameleons, it's normal to see chameleon ribs. Normally, if we can see the ribs on an animal, we freak out because that means they're too skinny. But I'm like, actually, being able to see their ribs is within the normal range. Now, if you're seeing a tailbone or cheekbones, now you've gone into territory of them being too skinny. But on the flip side, if their casque is starting to look rounded, if their cheeks are starting to look rounded, their arms looking a little puffy, then they're now in the overweight.
So with snakes, it's similar, where their body shape, if their body shape is a literal like round, like rotund circle, if you're looking at them from like a certain angle and it's too round, that is a sign of an overweight snake. They should be almost like not triangular, because triangular is where it's too skinny.
Tapered.
Yes, more tapered.
Yeah.
Is what it should be for snakes. And then with geckos, I mean, that's a hard one, but literally with crested geckos, you can see the rolls, man.
Oh my gosh.
You can see the thickness.
They're like Snickers candy bar. So I remember going to a reptile expo, and at this point Pluto was like a year old, which is like full grown, but like he could still probably like fill out a little bit at that point. And he seemed, in my opinion, skinny compared to some of the other geckos that they had that were like their breeder geckos. Those were some chunky.
You can get some chunky monkeys with those geckos. They get thick.
And I was like, when is my gecko gonna look like that? And then I'm like, wait.
It shouldn't.
Oh wait, I have learned now that that's not what we want. Yes, we want lean. So what about with like a leopard gecko? Because they've got chunky tails, fat tails. Honestly, or an African fat tail. It's in the name.
I would say that those are the harder ones to tell. It like in all actuality, it's really hard to describe without having pictures for reference.
Right.
So I would personally go to some of, the advancing husbandry Facebook groups, things like that. They have a lot of good graphs that literally show this is an obese one, this is a skinny one, this is healthy. So, or even honestly, just I would say like Google and you can find some pretty good graphs. And they have the same for snakes, which is what I was talking about of the shape of it from a certain angle. Like if you look up those graphs, you can actually see a reference of this is what it should look like. This is when you've gone too far on the skinny side, and this is when you've gone too far on the chunky side.
And unfortunately, going by weight or grams is not a great way to, because people will ask me like, how much should they weigh? I'm like, well, it varies because there's going to be smaller ones and bigger ones just by nature.
Like literally my Panther chameleon Barney that I had, he literally was a very small male chameleon by comparison. He I think weighed like something crazy, like 30 grams less than Neptune did. And he was 100% a healthy male.
Physically smaller animal. So going off of grams and weight,
it's not accurate.
What you can do though is when you know your animal is at a healthy weight, get that weight.
Yes.
And then that's now your baseline.
That's your base. Yeah.
Yeah. So then if they're going above, and we're not talking like a couple grams, we're talking, like, a significant amount. But if they're going above their base weight or under, right, goes both ways, then you have a point of reference for like what that should be.
And it's important to know that point of reference. That's actually something I personally need to be better about, is weighing all my reptiles more often.
It's hard, especially the ones that don't like to be handled, and
they just jump off the scale all the time.
Boogers. I know. totally get that. So I think we've kind of covered what obesity looks like. And again, the downfall of it is just more stress on their body, on their organs, which then in theory is decreasing their life expectancy. So we want to avoid that. So I think a big one is just nutrition, right? Just honestly, the diet of the animal.
The nutrition, in all honesty, is like the number one factor, obviously. So if you can get that in line, if you can get your feeding schedule in line, and the feeding schedule varies by age, so we'll talk about that.
Yep.
But it's, once you get that kind of stuff like solidified, then you can usually maintain that baseline really well. But I know...
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just saying, I know there have been times that even with Neptune, like their weight can fluctuate. So sometimes you have to just keep an eye on it. I know you've mentioned before, like, oh, his cheeks are looking a little skinny, I'm going to up his food intake. And then you've told me before, back when I had Barney, you even told me like, he's looking a little chunky. We need to fix that diet.
Yeah. It's not like consistent for, because one thing we did want to talk about was physical activity as well. So my chameleons get more outdoor time, obviously during the warmer months versus in the colder months. They don't go outside at all, or even peak of summer, they're not going outside. Right. So they're getting more outside time, more activity, in theory, burning more calories. Now, keep in mind, reptiles do not burn calories in the same way that like dogs do, for example, but having that physical activity can be something.
And that's something that you can provide in the enclosure as well as out of the enclosure.
Yes.
So climbing opportunities specifically for snakes can help their activity a lot. And so, make sure you're, and same with leopard geckos too. I know leopard geckos, most people consider them more terrestrial geckos, but they do climb. They will climb. That's something I'm working on currently in my leopard gecko enclosure, is adding a background that has lots of climbing ledges and stairways and things like that.
Love that.
Because if you give them those enrichment opportunities, they will most of the time utilize them unless something else is off.
Yeah, there's no downside to doing that.
So providing that in the enclosure so that they can naturally get their own exercise throughout the day. But then also, like you said, during the summer, like if the temperatures are right or acceptable, like take them out more, let them roam around, let them, because those are opportunities for that activity level.
Yep. We don't need to be putting them on little treadmills or anything like that. But
could you imagine?
I'm like, drop down and give me
My brain
20.
is literally thinking of a snake going on a treadmill.
Or just like a little beardy that's just like running.
Beardy's legs get going fast.
That's what I'm saying. Well,
they go real quick.
Now I'm picturing a gecko on like a bike, like pedaling. That's got to be on a t-shirt somewhere.
That would be such a cute little sticker or something. Oh my gosh.
So physical activity. But going back to the nutrition, not all bugs are created equally. Not all feeders are created equally. There's so much nutritional information that I feel like there's no excuse for not knowing. Like they have it literally broken down to the percentage.
Literally,
of what percentage of fat, protein, all these different components, both for bugs, for mice, for rats, for like all different feeders. So I think it's really important as a reptile keeper that we educate ourselves on the different nutrition of the different feeders that we're offering to them.
Totally. So like, for example, just for snakes, and we can talk about bugs too, but for snakes specifically, like there is so much more than just rodents that you can feed them, depending on the species. It obviously all varies by species. Do your own research, per usual. However, like mice compared to rats, mice, I've always been told, are way more fatty and are literally, like I've been told by breeders that, specifically corn snake breeders, I've talked to one in particular, and I've always been told that mice are much more of like the cheeseburgers of the reptiles, the McDonald's cheeseburger. I know, I mean, you know, it's a great treat, but, and some animals, or some snakes, obviously, when they're younger, you can only feed them mice because they're so small and things like that. So this all varies by age. And once they all get older, you can upgrade and change their diet a little bit more. But for example, mice are much more fatty than rats. And, you know, then you have, what are they called? Quail and things like that. You have birds that you can feed them, chicks, and those are a much leaner feeder than a rodent, you know, with all that extra, you know, chunkiness. And so they all vary. You also have fish that are more lean for semi-aquatic species and things. There's so many options and there's so many different things. So
but if you don't know, you don't know.
Right. And so many people, especially, you know, people who are, you know, still getting care from, you know, chain pet stores, all they have are mice. So you don't know any better.
Any different.
So look up the nutrition of the feeders that you're feeding, because they, you know, and then we can get into bugs too.
Yeah, bugs. So speaking of like what chain stores carry, they're predominantly mealworms and crickets.
That's about it.
Right. And we have started to see some occasional superworms, occasional hornworms, whatever.
One hornworm for sale for $5.
Like $7. Okay. And it's like gigantic. Yeah. But so typically dubias and crickets are
the leaner option.
Yeah, very commonly used, high in protein. Then you've got things like silkworms, black soldier fly larvae. Those are really good staples. You'll hear the word staple thrown around a lot, followed by tree bugs. And I'm a big proponent that variety is everything. They're how many tree bugs should I feed? How often? And like I said, it varies, right?
And also, quite literally, providing your animal with a varied diet is going to help them with a proper weight in general. Like if you're feeding them a varied diet and not feeding them the same thing every day, then they're less likely to get more obese because it's you know, fluctuating. So
so then good tree bugs that are going to be higher in fat would be things like superworms, waxworms, mealworms, hornworms, all those types of things.
For all my leopard gecko and African fat-tailed gecko owners out there, be very careful with the waxworms, because those two species of geckos are known to get like addicted to waxworms.
Yeah, superworms are the thing for chameleons. Yeah, I love those.
What I hear all the time in my comments is that they're, you know, leopard gecko, African fat-tailed gecko will not eat anything other than waxworms or mealworms, and those are quite literally two of the fattiest feeders you can feed them. Superworms too, you know, it's in that same category, but Yeah. So I think having a strong understanding, and there's great resources online. Tons. A lot of feeder companies actually provide the nutritional information in their like care sheets and stuff like that. Wherever you are getting your feeders, check their website. I guarantee it's on there. You know?
So it's really good to understand. So first things first is knowing what you're feeding your reptile, but then also how much you're feeding. I think a lot of people don't realize as reptiles get older, they eat less. They eat more as a baby.
Because they're growing.
Yes. Yeah. And so they're growing, they're shedding, they're doing all that. And then as an adult, their growth rate drastically plateaus.
Completely, yeah.
Technically, they're growing throughout their entire lifespan.
But like the tiniest little amount. Yeah. Tiny.
Which is why they're not shedding as often, and which is why we cut back on their food.
And that can vary by quantity and also by frequency. So how often are you feeding them and how much are you feeding them?
I feel like most times it's both, right? It's both quantity and frequency. There's some variable on both fronts that are being
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so what, works for me for a lot of my geckos in particular, I usually feed twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays. And once they're adults, I usually do anywhere between, 6 to 10 bugs, usually 6 to 8. If I feel like, they haven't been eating as much or something, I'll up it to 10, but it's usually around 6 to 8. And that has worked very, very well for my adult geckos with maintaining leanness, but also like healthy weights.
So someone was shocked. I did a feeding video with Pluto mycrosid gecko, and in there I have my little like tracker, and I like was showing like what days I was feeding him what flavors, and they're like, "You don't feed him every day? I thought you're supposed to feed them every day." And I was like, "My guy's an adult, so he doesn't eat every day."
And I hate using blanket statements, but I would argue that most adult reptiles, almost any species, shouldn't be eating every day.
Throw a little asterisk on there.
Most asterisk of, some depends.
Sure.
Some depends. But if I'm being really honest, like I see, and again, I'm not a bearded dragon owner, so tell me in the comments if I'm wrong, please, like correct me all day. But I see so often beardy owners feeding their beardies a huge salad with bugs as a topper every single day. And quite honestly, I don't think that's right. I could be wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Right.
But
they were like shocked that I wasn't like, as if I was like neglecting him by not feeding him all the time. And I was like, am I doing something? Like,
no,
it made me
not.
like second guess myself. I'm like, I don't think I'm supposed to be. And so it's kind of a weird concept for us as people, because we eat when we're hungry
multiple times a day.
And just because your gecko is eating every single day, and just because your beardy is eating every single, doesn't mean they should be doing that. And I think it's important to discuss how reptiles are opportunistic feeders, and that they see food, they eat food. They're not necessarily hunting down food because they're hungry. So if we take that same behavior and put it in captivity, then they see food, they eat food, except for we as humans, we only eat when we're hungry. So then we try and put it together like,
whereas reptiles will literally never stop eating if you don't let them.
Versus like, the lizards, like, they're still eating, so they must still be hungry. That's not.
No.
And granted, there are exceptions. Like there are some reptiles that do a good job of just naturally regulating their appetite and things like that. But of course, we have exceptions where they get a little chunky.
Yeah, and obviously, like with snakes too, snakes can go off of food. So like but that doesn't necessarily mean they're hungry or they're, it's like they might not be starving. There might just be something you got to fix. Yeah. So yeah, there's just a lot of factors.
A lot of nuances, that go into that.
Need crickets delivered to your doorstep for all of your hungry reptile and amphibian friends? Josh's Frogs has got you covered. We've mentioned so many times on the pod how convenient, well-priced, and healthy it is to buy your bugs online.
Josh's Frogs now offers auto delivery for your commonly ordered items. You choose the products, frequency, and preferred delivery day. They take care of the rest.
They offer a range of feeder cricket sizes to fit your pet's needs, all the way from pinheads up to 1 inch.
Head on over to joshsfrogs.com and use coupon code THEWildType10 to save 10% on your next order of live crickets.
A new month means new deals.
You guys already know we're big fans of Pangea Reptile, and they have a ton of sales and discounts for the month of March, including their supplements. We hope you get lucky and take advantage of their green promotion for St. Patrick's Day. Many green products will be on sale, including plants, hanging bushes, ultimate vines, and succulents.
Then be on the lookout for their spring cleaning clearance sale. And the last one is for all of our rescues. Pangea is also discounting a ton of health-related products, and each promotion runs for 1 week. So head on over to PangeaReptile.com so you don't miss out.
If you're looking for a new enclosure for one of your critters, be sure to check out the ones from Zen Habitats. Every enclosure is customizable, allowing you to mimic nature and provide the various UVB and heat gradients required for your species, which means they'll work great for both tropical and arid environments.
One of our very favorite things is how easy Zen makes it to stack multiple enclosures with their stacking spacers, and their extension kits allow you to be even more efficient with your space. All of their enclosures, stands, and spacers come with a 5-year warranty and free shipping on all their orders. Check out zenhabitats.com for your next enclosure.
So we're going to move on to our next segment, and this comes from our listener at Mr. Will Exotic. I love how recently we've had a lot of usernames that have like exotic or reptile.
Honestly, we see that a lot for sure. Yeah. And it just goes to show that I think a lot of people create accounts for their pets.
Hey, we're guilty of it.
Yeah, which is cool. I mean, I love it. I love seeing that.
So they ask, this is again tips from the pros. How do you get exposure as a new reptile content creator?
I love this question. I think it's fun. Honestly,
you want to kick it off?
Yeah, there's so many different ways. I would say, first off, be aware that you're probably going to be doing like a good amount of like product promotion for free in your early days as you're looking to get exposure and as you're growing.
So you're talking from exposure from brands. Okay. Okay. I interpreted this question as exposure, just like follower account, like just growing your account in general.
That's a great point. It's probably that. I probably just misinterpreted it with the brands.
No, but
I'm always thinking.
Maybe we can do follower account first, and then we can kind of get some tidbits on brands, because they go hand in hand. As your follower account's growing, then you can start doing
honestly
brand deals.
When it comes to that, you need to think of content ideas that are shareable, that are things that people are going to share with each other and just driving engagement. So
the way that I try to think of things that are shareable is when I'm watching, you're like, oh my gosh, me too.
Yeah.
Something
relatable content.
If someone else was watching this, something that's a common scenario that other keepers experience, a frustration that other keepers experience, things that people also would find hilarious, or someone said something to you that other people would understand. So then they go, oh my gosh, me too. And then they want to share it to their friend, who shares it to their friend, and then
stuff that's relatable. I think it's also really, really important to jump on trends as quickly as you possibly can.
Yes, I want to make sure we talked about that.
The trends are really huge, because even though like that's not necessarily the content that's going to always be able to provide the most value or the most advice or the most tips, it's typically the most relatable content.
Right. Yep.
So it's the trends are pretty huge. Yeah.
I know some of them are cheesy, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do.
I have posted some cringy trend content. Let me tell you, I'm sure that has been sent around to people from my high school or whatever, being like, look at what she's doing. But you know what? It's exposure. Send it. Send it to all your people. Make fun of me. I don't care. It's engagement.
It totally is. I think, too, it depends on what platform this person's referring to. Because how you get exposure on TikTok
is trends
versus Instagram versus YouTube.
All very different.
Completely different. So speaking to the YouTube piece of it, trends aren't what's going to get you exposure. Relatable stuff isn't necessarily what's going to get you exposure. It's going to be stuff that's searchable.
Yeah.
It's going to be the how do I this? How do you do this? Stuff that people are putting into the search bar.
Totally.
And that's what's going to get you views and consistency. Right?
Like consistency is everything.
The algorithm rewards consistency.
Totally.
YouTube in particular, TikTok especially. Instagram, I feel like, is a little hit or miss.
Yeah, Instagram. Who knows what they're doing with that algorithm, honestly. But I will say for the consistency piece of it, I think what you have to do, and I'm absolutely not the best at this because I have not been consistent in the last year. That's something I'm working on. But find what is able to be, for what you are able to be consistent with. Don't set yourself up for failure by saying, I'm going to post every single day, because then you will be disappointed if that's such a drastic shift.
Yes.
So like,
it's also a lot.
It's a lot. I personally struggle with that.
Like daily posting is a lot. Huge undertaking. Even doing weekly YouTube videos, like I'm talking long form. I'm not talking shorts. Like long form, highly edited, like 10+ minute video, to do that on a weekly basis, even that
there's a reason.
Is ambitious.
There's a reason I'm not doing that.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a huge undertaking. So with consistency, find what you are capable of that you can stick to. That's the number one thing. If that is 3 times a week, if that is once a week even, find what you are able to do and stick to it so that it's constant.
I would say at least once a week at a minimum. Because I'm like, if you're posting once every 2 weeks, that's just not gonna, you're not going to get the momentum that you need, the traction, the following, etc. if you're not posting at least. You have to have some level of cadence and frequency to get to that point.
And what I think, on the lowest level, I think you should try to stick to 2 to 3 times a week at a minimum. But if you can do more, do more,
Also, as far as building exposure, don't discount collabs, right? Like doing collabs with other content creators. I know this can be a little bit daunting and easier said than done.
Yeah.
But try and find someone who's within a similar follower count as you, because then they're going to be more inclined to want to do something with you. If you have 10 followers and you're reaching out to an account that has 100,000 followers,
it's less likely.
Not zero.
Zero.
Just less.
Setting expectations. Yeah.
So trying to find in similar creators to you.
Yeah.
And then commenting on their stuff, engaging with their stuff in on your videos, commenting back to your comments, because that's creating community.
Yes.
And that is going to also make people more inclined to want to share your content.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a huge one. The collabs is a big part of it. And then going back to my original point when I misinterpreted the question was...
well, I don't know. Maybe that's how they meant it, but I just took it differently.
No, honestly, it could have been either way.
They just said exposure.
Yeah, I think yours is the most likely. But if this was your comment, let us know which one you meant.
Who's right?
Yeah, we'll fight it out. Just let me know. But if you're looking for exposure with brands in order to make it, a profitable thing, my number one thing is give away the promotion for free in your early days.
Yes.
Because that is something that if you are, one of my biggest things, one of the partners that I work with is one that I started posting about their stuff in like 2017. I have been using their products forever. I am a diehard for those products. And it wasn't until like 2022, I think, that they actually found me at an expo and were like, hey, you are tagging us all the time. Let's like make this a partnership. And I was like, hell yeah, finally, where you been?
Yeah.
Like, let's go. So, if you're doing that, eventually they'll notice.
And it's genuine. It's authentic.
Genuine.
Right.
Yeah.
And these are products that you genuinely support and you don't mind sending business their direction
for free in the beginning. Yeah.
And in theory, if they reach out to a partnership, you're more likely to say yes, because it is a product that you are already supportive of, right? In your instance, versus some Joe Schmo brand who's reaching out to you like, I've never heard of you.
Yeah.
Right. Versus this one, you're like, hey, I've used your products. I love your products. I see what you stand for and I'm all about it. Sign me up.
And the brands appreciate that too, because the brands need people who really believe in their products, because otherwise, like you said, the genuinity of it, like if it doesn't feel genuine for the brand, then why are they going to work with you?
Yep.
So I think building that up in the beginning will lead to those opportunities.
So simply just tagging brands in your content, right? Don't be afraid to be like at whatever big name brand. I know it can be a little daunting because you're like, oh, what if they see it? Well, what if they see it, right?
And then just tag them. What harm is it going to do?
Yeah, I think it's super important.
Like if you're already posting content, I can promise you're already posting and sharing some products. So just tag them.
Yeah.
Tag them in it.
Nothing to lose.
Shameless tag.
Also, I want to know your opinion on hashtags, because I feel like when we're talking exposure, but like back in the day, hashtags were all the rage. The more hashtags, the better. And I feel like hashtag strategy has changed a little bit. What are your thoughts?
It freaking varies, and I hate the platforms for it because they change it within their algorithm all the time. So like I know Meta in particular, which is Facebook and Instagram, have come out more recently saying that they want you to use 6 or less, which is wild because people will be posting blocks of hashtags.
Because I did the 6 or less thing and my views dropped.
See, that's interesting. But literally Meta has come out and made statements saying essentially saying the algorithm will ding you if you use more than 6, but that's clearly not the case in your or true in your case.
Yep.
So I honestly, I don't freaking know. It's a wild west when it comes to hashtags. I think back in the day, hashtags used to be so critical because the amount of content on the internet wasn't that much. Now there's so much content on the internet. It's like, okay, what are the purpose of hashtags anymore?
I try to be in Instagram, not so much, because I'm like hashtag lizards, but like especially on TikTok, I try to be a little specific. Like if there's a trend that I'm doing,
100%.
then I do like a hashtag with whatever the like first couple words or whatever of that audio is for the trend. So I try to be intentional with that because I do think that does help with a little bit of growth. I think learning a little bit tips and tricks of just general SEO, search engine optimization.
SEO will
how to optimize your captions, how to optimize your titles.
I would argue too, specifically on TikTok SEO. I think Instagram's algorithm when it comes to SEO is trash, but TikTok is getting very, very similar to YouTube in how much searchable content they've been.
And YouTube is the second largest search engine right behind Google. So your stuff has to be optimized.
And I guarantee TikTok is going to be right up there with YouTube in terms of searchable because it is just becoming, people are actually starting to utilize TikTok more than Google.
Right. If you want a recipe, you're going over to TikTok and you're like chicken crockpot recipe.
I literally do that every week when planning meals for Logan and I all the time. Yeah.
So then if I was a food creator, then I need to put in my in my title, in my thumbnail, in my whatever.
Another one, sorry, I just
light bulb.
popped into my head.
Go for it.
Another really good trick, specifically on TikTok and Instagram, is if you can utilize, obviously they have the auto captions that they like put on there, but utilize the auto captions. And if you don't want them on there because they're going to be so busy or whatever, just move it to where it's off the screen, but it's still in the video, because that is also something the algorithm is reading those words and placing it in the feed using those words. So even if you're literally, so do it with the auto captions, but then I would also, not the hashtags, but whatever the words are that you're using in your hashtags, you can take those words and just list them and then move it off the screen. And it will, that's a little like SEO backdoor, because the algorithm will read it as still in the video, even if it's not on the screen.
Text on screen. Yeah.
So whatever the context of your video is, if you're talking about a leopard gecko enclosure, leopard gecko enclosure build, bioactive enclosure, and then slide it off the screen.
Smart.
It's a little sneaky hack for you. So.
Yeah. This one may be a no-brainer, but follow accounts, right? Like follow other accounts that have similar content to you or stuff that you find interesting. I also try to keep a little bit of separation. We mentioned that people are having these reptile accounts. My reptile account, I only follow other reptile accounts.
Me too.
Like I'm not following a food account with my Chameleon account.
Totally.
So I keep it very simple so then I can engage with those content. And then you can also see trends, what other creators are doing, and maybe things that you can pick up on. You're commenting, you're interacting. So very simply, don't be stingy with your follows, but then also don't be the person who's just following. Yeah, I think you have to be a little.
You do, I think so. Yeah,
a little thoughtful about it.
Yeah. No, I think that's a lot of
talk
creator
about tips
advice.
From the pros.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to see other creators grow. I always want to see, cool new reptile accounts and cool new content. Yeah.
Don't feel like it's oversaturated. Like, don't feel like there's not space for you.
No.
Like,
it's not a competition.
No.
It's like there's enough room in the pot for all of us. I can promise you that.
No. People have been like, oh, what would you feel like if there's another Chameleon
That'd
YouTuber?
Be awesome.
I was like, please.
Let's go.
Please.
Yeah.
As long as you're putting out solid care advice, you're doing right by the animal.
If you're giving bad care advice, I might become not a fan, but
I would encourage you not yet to do that. But
yeah, but no, I mean, more the merrier. Join in, take some tips, and hopefully grow. Get that exposure.
Yeah, and if you guys have any advice for anyone who's trying to get some reach, some growth, some exposure, please
drop it in the comments. Yeah, we want to hear it. I mean, hell, I could always use more exposure too. We all can. So give us some pro tips if we didn't mention any.
Yeah, please do. Was there anything else you want to?
I think that's it. Mention? Yeah, no, I think I'm good.
Okay. Are there any updates on your enclosure builds?
So I'm currently working on siliconing all of the bottoms because I have actually recently decided. So one of them is for Kermit, my tiger salamander.
Yeah.
And you don't even know this yet. This literally happened like
hot off the press
2 days ago. I have officially decided that I'm going to be using a water feature in there for her. Oh. So she is going to be getting, I don't necessarily know if I'm going to do like a waterfall, but I have found online a really cool rimless, like top rimless, not a fish tank, but like an aquarium kind of, essentially a little tank. And it is like the perfect size. And so I'm going to fit it into the enclosure and put a filter on it. And I'm essentially going to put like a fish tank, but it's not a fish tank, in her enclosure.
Oh, and the filter should, because my qualm with waterfalls is that they just are so difficult to clean. Yes. So you feel like the filtration and everything will do a good job of. I
don't think I want to do a waterfall for that exact reason, but I am going to put a filter in there, and that should be very easy to clean. I mean, there's instructions on how to clean it. It should be pretty easy.
Okay, so that's the update on Kermit. That's very exciting. This will be your first water feature.
And I'm so excited.
Which is probably a good guinea pig before you do. Is that part of the plan?
Literally was part of my plan. I was like, if I get this right in Kermit's enclosure, then I can utilize a similar method for Tarzan's.
Got it.
So that's my current thought process.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Kermit's is going to be a lot smaller than Tarzan's, so I want to make sure I get it right on a small scale before I go on a big scale.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot of learnings that come from that. So
I'm also a little scared because water stuff makes me anxious. It's so messy.
That's why we don't have turtles.
Literally. Yeah, exactly.
So I'm like, tortoise? Sounds pretty cool. Turtle?
So that's
very daunting.
That's my big update. And then the only other real update is I think the one that I'm going to get done the very, very first is going to be Charlie's. And the reason being is that I'm potentially making room for a little rehoming situation that I'm taking.
I feel like you've teased that
I have
a little bit. Very, very excited for that to be official I'll
make an announcement sometime
get some
soon.
Momentum on that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm very, very excited for that. No, enclosure builds are just stressful. For one, but they're so much fun.
They're so much fun, but it's such an undertaking. And I'm really adamant that these are like my last ones. And so it's
you want to do them right.
Yeah. So, and I have a tendency to, if it's like a really big undertaking, kind of procrastinate a little bit. So there's been a little bit of me working on that and not doing that. So
well, that's why you have your reptile friend over here who bugs you and be like, hey,
what's going on?
What's the update on the enclosure?
Because I appreciate it.
Need to,
little push.
Yeah, hold ourselves accountable a little bit. Yeah, no, I'm all for enclosure builds. I think it's wonderful. They're one of my favorite things. I love watching enclosure build videos.
It's my favorite. I cannot wait. So it's fun. I got a lot in the works. I'm basically the process I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing all the backgrounds first, then the build of it all. So I'm probably going to do Kermit's last because of the water feature. So.
Makes sense. Yeah. Makes sense. Well, very excited for you. We'll keep you guys updated as the progression continues. Yeah. But thank you guys so much for listening, as always, for subscribing, for commenting, for interacting. Speaking of exposure, we're still small. Podcast just getting started. So anything you guys do, sharing the podcast, interacting with it, everything we just described, that helps. Yeah. That helps us. So thank you.
We can't thank you guys enough, and we just appreciate you.
So be sure to follow us on all the socials. You can follow me at Neptune Chameleon.
At Lyssa Lizards.
Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
We'll talk to you next time, girlies.